mission delivered new scientific experiments and cargo to the International Space Station when it docked on Monday, August 25th to the forward port of the space station's Harmony module, which has now been its home for the past 6 months. During its time docked to the orbiting laboratory, the Dragon spacecraft introduced a new capability to reboost the space station, helping maintain its altitude and counter atmospheric drag, which is critical for safe operations and the long-term sustainability of the orbital complex. Dragon performed 6 total reboosts, 5 in 2025, and then a final maneuver in January before preparations for its departure began. Following today's undocking and departure, the Dragon spacecraft is scheduled to splash down off the coast of California around 11:44 p.m. Pacific later today, 1:44 a.m. Central, Friday, February 27th. Coming up in about 5 minutes at around 10:50 a.m. Central, 11:50 a.m. Eastern, we are expecting the final go, no-go poll for undocking. And this poll confirms that the NASA team here in Mission Control Houston, which you're seeing a live view there on your screen, along with the SpaceX team in Hawthorne, California, are ready to proceed with Dragon's departure. Currently on console here in the International Space Station Flight Control Room is the Orbit 2 team of flight controllers being led by Flight Director Chloe Maring there on the left side of your screen, whose call sign is Lion Flight, and to her right is the Capcom or capsule communicator Costa Mavridis. The Capcom serves as the voice link between Mission Control and the space station crew. Mission Control Houston operates 24/7, 365 days a year with 3 shifts per day known as orbits. Along with the team here in Houston, they are working hand in hand with the SpaceX Mission Control team out in Hawthorne, California, who is also on console supporting today's undocking operations. The SpaceX team out there, which you can see live on your screen, is led by their mission director, commonly referred to as the MD. After the Dragon spacecraft crosses the approach ellipsoid, which is an invisible boundary around the space station that governs visiting spacecraft, joint operations between the NASA and SpaceX teams will end, and responsibility for the spacecraft will be handed back to the SpaceX team. Again, you're seeing a live look of the Dragon spacecraft attached to the Harmony module on the International Space Station as it prepares for today's undocking. We're expecting that final go, no-go poll in about a minute, and that undocking is scheduled at 11:05 a.m. Central, 12:05 p.m. Eastern today. Now, currently on board the International Space Station is the Expedition 74 crew. They are led by the current space station commander, Sergei Kudzvirshkov of Roscosmos, and you can see a picture of all of the Expedition 74 crew members on your screen. And less than 2 weeks ago, Crew 12, which includes NASA astronauts Jessica Meir and Jack Hathaway, ESA or European Space Agency astronaut Sophie Adana, and Roscosmos cosmonaut Andrei Fedyaev, launched and docked to the orbiting laboratory and joined Expedition 74. Also on board are NASA astronaut Chris Williams and Roscosmos cosmonaut Sergei Mikhaev. And we did just hear moments ago that the SpaceX and NASA teams have pulled go for today's undocking, so we are good to proceed with the undocking in just about 15 minutes from now.
Dragon is go for undocking and departure. We are 10 minutes away from the command for undock. You have 10 minutes.
And you just heard the call up to the space station crew by the Capcom or capsule communicator Costa Mavridis to the space station crew confirming the undocking in about 15 minutes. The undock command will be sent about 5 minutes ahead of the physical separation. Once the undock command is sent, the umbilicals that are attached to the space station along with the hooks that are keeping Dragon hard mated to the space station will retract to allow that physical separation to take place. The space station crew that's currently on board Expedition 74, it began in December following the departure of the Soyuz MS-27 spacecraft and will continue through July of this year. After the Soyuz MS-28 spacecraft departs the station in July, carrying NASA astronauts Chris Williams and his Roscosmos crewmates back to Earth, Expedition 75 will officially commence, led by NASA astronaut Jessica Meir. The current space station commander, Sergei Kudzvirshkov of Roscosmos, will hand over command of the space station shortly before the Soyuz MS-28 departure during a standard change of command ceremony. In preparation for today's undocking, the Expedition 74 crew has been packing the Dragon spacecraft with cargo for return to Earth. Several scientific investigations are returning aboard Dragon, offering insights that could help shape the future of space exploration and life on Earth. One of the experiments returning today is a study known as Euro material aging, which exposed 141 samples to space for a year to examine how coatings, insulation, and 3D printed materials degrade. The preparations for today's undocking have been taking place over the past few days and weeks as cargo has been packed into the Dragon spacecraft return, and then just today, about a couple of hours ago, around 9 a.m. Central, 10 a.m. Eastern, the hatches between the space station and Dragon were sealed. On board space station, NASA astronaut Chris Williams helped work through those procedures to close the hatches. Following hatch closure, the process to depressurize the vestibule began, along with leak checks, and the vestibule is the area between the Dragon and space station hatches that is exposed to the vacuum of space prior to the docking of a visiting spacecraft. Once a spacecraft docks, the area is pressurized to match the pressure aboard the space station, which is about 14.7 psi, or pounds per square inch, which is equivalent to Earth's atmospheric pressure. Again, you're seeing a live look of the Dragon spacecraft that we are expecting to undock in about 13 minutes from now at 11:05 a.m. Central, 12:05 p.m. Eastern. Physical separation of the Dragon spacecraft from the forward port of the station's Harmony module is set again for about 12 minutes from now, and just like its approach to the space station, Dragon's departure and deorbit is fully autonomous. Departure is typically quicker than arrival, as the spacecraft doesn't have to stop at any waypoints like we see when a spacecraft arrives. The undocking command will be sent about 5 minutes prior to physical separation. At that point, the umbilicals will retract. These umbilicals connect Dragon systems to the space station, transferring power, telemetry, and commands between the two spacecrafts during Dragon's stay. After the umbilicals retract, the hooks that are currently keeping Dragon attached to the space station will unlatch. There are 2 sets of 6 hooks for a total of 12 hooks. Once that process is complete, Dragon will then be ready to depart from the space station and will begin to move itself further away using its thrusters. Dragon will first execute 2 short thruster firings to undock using a combination of the 12 Draco thrusters around the base of the spacecraft. The first firing will break any stiction between Dragon and the docking port, and then the second firing will slowly back the spacecraft away, and we will have that physical separation. Following physical separation, again planned for 11:05 a.m. Central, 12:05 p.m. Eastern, Dragon will then use its Draco thrusters again to move away from the station in a series of 4 departure burns. These departure burns are carefully choreographed maneuvers that increase the distance between the spacecraft and the space station. Shortly after Dragon completes departure burn 1, Dragon will exit the keep-out sphere. The keep-out sphere is a 200-meter invisible boundary around the space station, and it is one of several safety zones set up to govern visiting spacecraft either arriving or departing the space station.
Station Houston, we are 5 minutes away from undock. Please pause exercise.
And you just heard that call up from
Station copies.
And you just heard that call up from the Capcom, or capsule communicator, here in Mission Control to the space station crew aboard the International Space Station that we are about 5 minutes away from that undocking command to begin. And they mentioned that they will pause any exercise going on, and that is to avoid imparting any additional loads during the active operations. Now, before the spacecraft moves into the keep-out sphere, they have to be configured to where they would not cross the imaginary boundary for at least 4 orbits, even if the spacecraft lost all maneuvering. And then after Dragon departs the keep-out sphere, the next milestone is exiting the approach ellipsoid. The approach ellipsoid is another imaginary shape similar to the keep-out sphere, but this time it's a 3-dimensional ellipsoid measuring 4 by 2 by 2 kilometers. One of the key differences with the approach ellipsoid is that spacecraft outside of it have to be on what we call a 24-hour safe free drift trajectory. That means the spacecraft would not cross into the approach ellipsoid for at least 24 hours again, even if it lost all maneuvering. After Dragon exits the approach ellipsoid, joint operations between the NASA and SpaceX teams will conclude, and Dragon will be well on its way back to Earth, again with splashdown expected off the coast of California around 11:44 p.m. Pacific later today, 1:44 a.m. Central Friday, February 27th. Again, we are about 4 minutes away from that undocking command. Once that undocking command is sent, it'll be about 5 minutes before we have confirmation of physical separation. And we are about 3 minutes away from that undocking command being sent, and that will kick off a sequence of events that will then lead to the physical separation of the Dragon spacecraft for the NASA SpaceX 33rd Commercial Resupply Services mission. The Dragon spacecraft was packed with cargo over the past few weeks, and some of those include scientific investigations that will be returning to Earth. One of those is the Space Dwino project, which is paving the way for more low-cost instruments after successfully measuring vibrations using commercially available single-board computer and open-source software. And another one of the experiments returning is known as the Moon Microscope, which also successfully tested a portable diagnostic kit for blood analysis in space that could support future missions to the Moon and Mars. Again, we are about 2 minutes away from the undocking command being sent. Once the undocking command is sent, the first step will be for the umbilicals to retract. After that, the 12 hooks that are currently keeping Dragon attached to the space station will start to unlatch in 2 sets of 6. And then after that, there will be 2 short thruster firings known as undock burns to physically separate Dragon from the International Space Station and set it on its course back to Earth. We are now about 30 seconds away from that undock command being sent. Currently, the International Space Station and Dragon are flying about 260 statute miles off the coast of Chile. And on your screen, you're continuing to see a live view of that Dragon spacecraft, again attached to the forward port of the space station's Harmony module, which has been its home for the last 6 months since its launch last August. And the undock sequence has begun with that undock command being sent. Again, the departure process is completely autonomous, so now that this undock command has been sent, the umbilicals will retract. Those umbilicals were attached following the docking of the Dragon spacecraft back in August, and they help provide data and telemetry between the space station to the Dragon spacecraft. And we have confirmation that those umbilicals have demated. Next up will be the retraction of the 12 hooks that are currently attaching Dragon to the International Space Station. Again, those hooks will drive in 2 sets of 6, and that first set of hooks are currently driving. And this is Mission Control Houston. It's been about 2 minutes since that undock command was sent. Again, the entire undock sequence takes about 5 minutes from the command being sent to the physical separation taking place. So we are about 3 minutes away from that physical separation, and the hooks are currently unlatching. Once all 12 hooks have unlatched, there will be 2 short thruster firings that will help break any stiction and then push Dragon initially away from the International Space Station, marking that physical separation and the end of its resupply mission to the International Space Station. And the first set of hooks are now open, and the second set of 6 hooks are now driving open. So we are now committed to undocking.
Hooks open. Dragon is committed to undock.
The second set of hooks are continuing to drive open, and we are about a minute away from that expected physical separation. We have a brief loss of signal, or LOS, and that is due to a change in the ground station's the tracking and data relay satellite system, or TDRS, that provides the communications between the International Space Station and Dragon, but we should have those views back shortly. And we have confirmation that the Dragon spacecraft has undocked from the International Space Station at 11:05 a.m. Central, 12:05 p.m. Eastern, as the space station was traveling 260 statute miles over western Argentina. Again, this marks the completion.
Station Houston, all hooks open. Dragon separation is confirmed.
And you heard that call up there from the Capcom or capsule communicator who is here in Mission Control Houston. Again, they serve as the voice link between the crew and the ground. And again, with that undocking confirmed at 11:05 a.m. Central, 12:05 p.m. Eastern, as the space station was traveling 260 statute miles over western Argentina. Again, this marks the completion of NASA's SpaceX 33rd Commercial Resupply Services mission to the space station.
Station Houston, Dragon departure burn 0 complete.
And there you now have a live look of the Dragon spacecraft as it continues to back away from the International Space Station. And we do have confirmation that that first departure burn was completed. That was a 17-second burn and the first of 4 departure burns, which helped to move Dragon further away from the International Space Station. The next burn will be in about 4 minutes, around 11:10 a.m. Central, 12:10 p.m. Eastern, and that is departure burn 1. That burn will last about 24 seconds, and it will help move the spacecraft beyond the keep-out sphere.